Hey everybody, it's Dave. Before we get into it today, I wanted to just do some business real quick. I want to thank everybody who's listened so far. The response has been great. We've been very happy with it. And if you would go on to iTunes and rate and review us, that would be incredibly helpful. That would be a way that we can get a little more interest in the show, get it out to more people, and we're gonna keep going with this thing. I've got a lot more interviews lined up, and I'm gonna keep the schedule up. So if you wanted to help us out that way, that would be excellent. Also, follow us on Twitter at NosyNobody. The Twitter account isn't just going to be for this podcast. It's also going to be for other things off of nobodysnose.com. So do come check that out, please. And okay, let's just get right into it here. Here we go. Welcome back to another episode of I've Known You Too Long. My guest today I am very excited about. This was someone I knew I had to have on the show, but she did not live in the area anymore, and I didn't know how I was going to make that happen. I didn't want it to go long before we got her in here. Luckily, she was in town visiting relatives, and so we're going to make this work. It might be shorter than what we normally do, but maybe that'll be better anyway. My guest is Madis Keshevez. And I may well have pronounced her name incorrectly. That might be the first thing we ask her. I always knew Madis as Maddie. She was involved in the Northwest punk and hardcore scene on the east side, the Redmond Firehouse. We've talked about that on here quite a bit. She also did me the honor of starring in the lead female role in my film, The Edge of Quarrel. So I'm just going to go ahead and welcome her in right now.
Woohoo!
Hello, Maddie.
Captain Dave Larson.
Let's go. Before I even do my starting question, let's talk about the name. Is it okay that I call you Maddie?
You can. Yeah, you've known me long enough.
All right, but
I think 20 years gives you a thing.
But you don't like it.
I do kind of cringe at this point in my life, but it's all right.
No, I'll do it right. But the problem that I have is that a guy like me, 40-something-year-old white guy, mildly educated at best, public school,
break the mold, Larson.
How can I make it sound
Here it comes.
Right?
And I really, really hope that the entire Seattle hardcore scene is listening right now.
Okay.
Because it's Madis Keshevez, which sounds like ketchup jars.
Oh, you never told me that before.
One Jim Martin, who you may also recall, really did me the honor of telling me that he remembered my last name because it sounds like ketchup jars, and I use it to this day.
Okay. Madis.
Yes.
Now, my problem is I cringe at trying to make it sound like I'm affecting an accent I don't have.
You're not.
But I also feel like if I say it any other way, it sounds like I'm being like, Maddie. Like, all of a sudden I have that accent, that 20 miles out of any city accent that David Cross talks about.
I'm giving you an A for effort, so Madis.
Madis.
Yep. If Maddie falls out, fine. But Madis is preferred.
And then Keshevars.
Yep. See what ketchup jars does?
Ketchup
it totally
jars.
Gets you there.
Well, the thing is, I remember, when we were doing the movie, you definitely talked to me about how to correctly pronounce the name.
Right.
And the R is the only part that I really had a problem with because it just gets more Vez. And then it's like, well, that's not right either.
But look, with the jars, you're there.
Ketchup jars.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. Maddie.
Yes, sir.
Madis.
Yep.
I've known you too long.
Yeah. I'm afraid about what's about to come as I realize just how long you've known me.
No, don't be afraid. But I've known you so long. Okay, what I've been saying is I've known you so long that I don't remember when we met. That's been the common one with people. But with you, I feel like it's more I've known you so long that it's just a shame that we've been so out of contact for the last about 15 years. You left shortly after The Edge of Quarrel was done and went on to bigger and better things than a lot of people, from this scene have done. Interesting things, certainly. And it's just, you've been a real mover and shaker. And so I've missed you.
I've missed you as well.
Oh, thank you so much.
And we may be far apart, but I don't think we ever were not in love.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'm going to bring the heart sappy stuff to the show, Dave.
Oh, please. That's so great. What we do on the show is we talk about when we met. Mm-hmm. We figure out if we can figure out the exact moment where we were. And then we go back from there. And I try to figure out how it was, who you are, where you came from, and how it was that you came to be in a place where we would have met.
Okay.
Then we go forward and we talk about stuff that we remember and what you're doing now.
All right.
And that's it. That's the format.
I'm excited.
Where'd we meet?
I don't remember.
Old Firehouse.
I don't think it was the old Firehouse, Dave. I think that we met somewhere like the Velvet Elvis or some house show situation. Like it might have even been the Goat House.
Oh.
Because I don't think that the old Firehouse got fully like established. I think I knew you before it became fully established.
Shows at the Bellevue Y?
Possibly.
Would you have been sitting taking tickets or doing anything at the door?
No, I would have been. I think I was in line for the Fugazi shows and things, which I'm sure you were there as well.
No, absolutely. And with you, it seems like right about the time I became aware of Lex and Kate Becker
Right.
and that crew out there, you were part of that
there.
and you were there.
It's possible. I mean, I have the distinct memory and I feel like I see you. I see your awesome haircut, which was fundamentally different than what your hair is right now. And
The funny thing is, though, just before you met me, it was the same as this.
Really?
Yeah. It was short when I met you, right?
It was very short. It was super clean cut.
I have long hair now, but when I moved to Seattle, I had long hair and then I cut it off right after I got here. And that would have been end of 92.
Yeah. So
right about the time things were happening out there.
Right. Which is also, I mean, I graduated high school in 94. And so I don't think, I mean, the old Firehouse was going. So maybe it was the old Firehouse. It's possible.
Yeah. And I think.
And I remember you always wore a black t-shirt for your label and black pants and black Converse.
Yeah.
And we wore almost exclusively black. Anybody surprised?
you have an image of the clothing that I wore at the time.
I remember I have this distinct memory of seeing you and you're always being kind because it's a very male dominated scene and I'm sure that will be like a thread that we discuss tonight.
Cool.
But it was super man, and so I always felt like I had to assert myself a certain way. And I remember you always used to be there and you were always super friendly and super encouraging in a way for me and others to do stuff, like just do something. This is the scene, like you got to be punk, you got to be straight edge, it doesn't matter, just got to do something. This is it, the revolution's around the corner. And I was like, yeah, I got to take this dude seriously. And you always had flyers, which I felt we really shared this because I also always had a flyer. I was always promoting something and you always had something in your hands. You were never at a show without something in your hands.
Excursion Records stuff.
Always Excursion
ads
stuff.
for the label or
something. You always had worked on some project. And I'm sure you've talked about this on the other episodes, but your Kinko's hookup was legendary. I mean, if Kinko's was still around and functioning, they would come for you after these shows of confessions. Like how much.
It's funny how much Kinko's plays into.
And that, I think, is how we met.
Kinko's?
I think that you were working at Kinko's.
Bellevue?
No, on Capitol Hill.
Oh.
And you were, I want to say like,
later.
No, yeah, maybe. But you hooked it up for me at Kinko's a bunch of times.
Hooked it up, meaning I did a great job.
Excellent corporate
and charged
representative.
You correctly.
Absolutely. Thank you for my clicker.
Are you sure you're not mixing me up with like Wally?
Maybe it was Wally. Call him Wally.
All right. No, it was a little earlier than when I would have been at the because I was working just like one day a week at that Capitol Hill Kinko's, and Carrie Whitney would be in there.
Yeah, Carrie Whitney. But I met Carrie Whitney through you.
Sure, but you already knew me, right?
I already knew you.
Carrie Whitney basically appears in the beginning of the summer of 1994, and I think you.
Yeah, no, we were friends before that.
Right, and do you remember? This is a great with Rocky. This ended up being his very first show, so this was kind of a fun thing at the old Firehouse. Careful with that.
Sorry.
At the old Firehouse, there was a show in 93. It was probably spring of 93. Mm-hmm. It was Seaweed, Undertow, and Peeved. Mm-hmm. And it was huge.
Yeah,
it was probably the first time there was a big, like maybe 600 plus whatever show at the old Firehouse.
I totally remember that.
That show was kind of show was a really big deal. It's Rocky Votolato's first show.
Ever?
Maybe first show ever.
Wow.
And that wasn't a concert.
Right.
And we knew each other. You were well into the old Firehouse at that point, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I
helped start the old Firehouse, like.
Right. Okay, and so that's right after that Fugazi show, isn't it? Remember, there was the 1:10:07 show where they threw all the tortillas and everything too, and that was that maybe one of the very last Bellevue Y shows before the Firehouse was really going?
I think so. Because with the Bellevue Y, you remember I grew up in an Iranian household, so I did have to beg and plead to go to any show at that point because I wasn't fully employed by the city of Redmond, which gave me the legitimacy to tell my parents I was working. So to say like, I want to go to a show.
I so want to talk about this stuff. Oh, you have no idea.
Like, so I had to like lie, cheat, and steal like effectively to kind of convince my parents to let me go to shows. And that's why I started doing shows, because my parents would be like, one, it's work. But the second part was you and Keon Maymand, may he rest in peace, were the first to tell me like I should start doing my own thing and promoting my own shows. And that's when I was like, oh, I could start doing that. Like I didn't know. And so I think with the Seaweed Show, that was one of the first ones I remember like fully being involved and helping Kate and like doing all those things. And you, I think you're the one that introduced me to Aaron. Where is he now?
Aaron.
From Seaweed.
Oh yeah, he's around.
Yeah.
Seaweed does that. Okay. All right. So that would have been probably at that show.
Yeah.
Look, it's okay. So we won't spend too much time on it. It's Old Firehouse. It's as soon as I'm coming through the door. If you're working anything there, I'm probably saying like, hey, I need to sell merch. And I need to be able to take pictures up front in front of the barrier. And I'm talking to you. I'm talking to Kate. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's where we meet.
Mm-hmm. You also always handed me a pack of whatever flyer or whatever you're pushing. So I would also be handing those out.
Fantastic. Yeah. Okay. So that's where we become friends.
Mm-hmm.
And you were, I mean, what I do know about you is that you were immediately someone who was just a mover and a shaker. Like had a great attitude and just someone that I was like, ally.
Thank you.
Immediate sense of being an ally.
Thank you.
Well, you bet. It's true. I'm not lying. I don't need to lie.
I know, but like I said, it's a male-dominated scene. It wasn't easy. Still isn't easy.
So let's go back, because we've got a lot of cool things that we can talk about that we did and were involved in. But I want to know, just like what you just said, Iranian household, you're having to explain why you're going out to this place and doing this thing, but you have this job sort of, and that helps you. Where did you come from?
I come from Iran, land of the brave.
Were you born in Iran?
I was born in Iran. And then there was a revolution in my country, which was the result of many years of U.S. intervention.
Oddly enough, I'm old enough to remember this.
I'm rather impressed. And once that revolution hit, my family and many others decided to leave temporarily in our minds, because we wanted to kind of wait it out and see how things went so that we could go back home. And that wait ended up being a lifetime almost at this point.
How old were you when they left?
Almost 4.
Almost 4. And what year was that?
1980.
The revolution was in?
79.
79. So it wasn't long.
It wasn't long.
Was the hostage crisis over when they left, or it was?
I think it was a beginning as we left. And so when we first came to America, we went to Oklahoma. Unfortunate for my family, because no one sent us the memo about what it meant to be Iranian and going to the South.
Oh, what was the choice of going to Oklahoma?
I had an uncle who lived there. I had an uncle who was living there, so we thought, we'll go and we'll stay with family. And I think we lasted about 6 months.
You already had family in the U.S. at this point?
I had one uncle.
Okay.
Who'd come to study years before. He'd already been in the U.S., I think, like 6 or 7 years at that point. So well before the revolution and all that stuff. So he had come to study. He was living in Oklahoma. We came out to stay with him, and I think we lasted about 6 months before we were like, oh my God, we're in Oklahoma in the South. How many more times can we tell someone we're Mexican? Like, this sucks. And
I just listened to another podcast with another Persian person that said that they faked being Mexican.
Everyone,
in high school.
You had to fake it. You were not going to live. Like, as it was, I went to preschool and I had racism. I got beaten, all this.
Where did you go to preschool?
Oklahoma.
Okay, so you remember being in Oklahoma.
Well, you remember beatings. Like, those are things you remember. Like, I didn't get hit so much as a small child. A 3 or 4 year old doesn't, like, that's not supposed to happen. But, like,
you've been beaten up?
The paddle they bring out. The paddle's legal in Oklahoma.
So they were paddling you just because you were...
I laughed in class. I remember very distinctly. There was me and this boy, Richie, and he said something. I laughed, and I got in trouble, and he didn't. And they locked me in the bathroom, and they were like, I got the paddle, and then they were going to give me the paddle again, but they lock you in the bathroom. And as luck turned out, I had one of the cooks or somebody who was working there, also probably posing as a Mexican, called my dad, who was Iranian. They were Iranian, and they were, called my dad secretly and said, listen, they've locked your daughter in the bathroom here. You better come get her. And
How old are you?
I'm 4. And one of my
This
earliest
isn't
memories-
even grade, so this is preschool.
Yeah, it's like a Montessori or whatever it was, you know. And I was probably Montessori wouldn't have.
They locked a
that kind of-
4-year-old alone in the bathroom.
in the bathroom, and I knew that it was going to be my turn to get beaten again. So I was like petrified, sitting in the bathroom waiting, and the door opens, and there's my dad.
Oh,
And I was like, he's my hero to this day.
wow. Yeah, welcome to America.
Yeah,
So you got the hell out of Oklahoma.
quit with a quickness. And we went to the only natural place one would go after suffering through Norman, Oklahoma. Cheney, Washington.
Okay.
Clearly, my parents were not well versed in this land.
That's okay.
Just like, why are we here? For 6 years. But they went to university there. We went there. We lived there for, until the fourth grade. And in the fourth grade, we then came here and ended up in Kent. And then didn't last long in Kent. And then ended up on the east side.
Okay.
Where all self-respecting Iranians go.
Okay, well, good. So you came from Oklahoma. I don't know. Is Oklahoma the South? I guess it's
That's
might
yeah.
as well be, right?
Come on. Haven't you seen the musical?
No, no.
Oklahoma.
You learned that in preschool?
I went to the musical.
Okay. Now, but so you went to Eastern Washington. So you basically went to the South of Washington.
I did.
Like it's the same, almost the same thing. Certainly now, it seems like you cross over the mountains from the I-5 corridor, and you're just in
no man's land.
I took a trip over there recently in
Oh,
a rental car,
wow.
and as soon as I got over I was trying to find new radio stations, and I think I lost count at 13 different variations of Christian radio.
Yeah.
It was everything. I think it was like a Christian ska station or something. It was
Yeah.
crazy. So I'm like, oh, this is, I know where these
it's-
people's bread is buttered on one side, certainly.
You want to hear more trauma from my childhood?
Yes. I
One
don't
of
want to miss any of it.
Craziest things that happened to me as a child, and I swear I had to go to therapy for this one. This, and others, I'm sure. But this happened when we went to Cheney. I went to the universities. My parents enrolled me in the university preschool, whatever it was. And I didn't speak English. I didn't learn to speak English till the fourth grade.
Oh.
Roughly. Like perfect English.
Right.
Maybe second grade. It wasn't fourth grade. It was maybe second grade. And when we went to the school, there was one girl, like my parents were also, except for my dad, learning to speak English. And we're adjusting, we're figuring it out. And a young girl in the school came to me one day and she said, "You know what tonight is?" And I was like, "I don't know." And I remember distinctly, we're on the swing. It was on the slide, and it was going to be my turn to go. And I was like, "No, what's tonight?" And she says, "Tonight's the night that Jesus is coming down on his star, and he is going to save everyone except you and your family because you're Muslims and you're going to hell." I had no concept of Jesus, Muslim, not Muslim, Christian. I had no idea, but I went straight back to the classroom and puked all over the teacher.
Oh.
Petrified that this. And I remember coming home and distinctly remember coming home, being really upset. My mom being like, "What happened? Why'd you throw up?" And me putting my head on her shoulder and be like, "Mommy, tonight we're all going to die because this dude Jesus is coming for us."
Oh my God. Okay. So this was the first full message that you understand getting in English once you've learned the
Yeah,
language.
once I learned my first English
They may
phrase,
have been
it's
saying it to you the whole time.
It's possible. The teacher could have been saying it at that point, but it only fully registered when young Brittany or whatever her name was like, "Tonight is the night. Jesus is coming for you."
Oh, I enjoy laughing at painful,
You can
horrible
laugh. I'm
childhood
telling you,
stories.
that's traumatic.
Oh yeah, but
Yeah.
these things have a huge effect.
Major.
Yeah.
And you ask why I'm in human rights.
I didn't ask that,
Yeah.
but
Well,
we'll talk
one
about.
might ask
Yeah,
why I chose that.
you're just jumping ahead. I'll ask
Sorry.
that for
Yeah,
sure.
we'll get that.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So is that the most traumatic thing you remember happening in grade school?
Yeah, except for this one other girl, Brooke, who got her head cracked open at recess, but that's a whole other thing.
Okay. Unfortunately, we have to move kind of fast
That's
today
all
because
right.
we've got about a half hour left. So, so junior high. Are
Yes.
you over? You're still over there, Eastern Washington? When
No.
do you get to
I
the
moved,
Seattle
I moved
area?
to Seattle area fourth grade.
Fourth grade.
Fourth grade.
Kent,
Kent, and then quickly to Bellevue.
Bellevue.
Yeah.
Okay, and Bellevue's better.
Yeah, it's better. It's traumatic, but it's better.
And does your family have contact? Is your family involved with what's going on in the Middle East and in Iran?
Here's the thing. We moved to this country. If you know Iranian or world politics, whatever, shortly after the revolution in Iran, there was a war. The U.S. funded Iraq, Saddam Hussein, to attack Iran. They did. It resulted in a long war, I think 8 years. 1 million people died on both sides, including some of my family members. And so we didn't go back. And my childhood, in terms of up until I was maybe 12 years old, I guess, 12 or 13 years old, my experience of going back to Iran really revolved around, I wasn't able to go back. We only spoke on the phone to my family, and it oftentimes was you would hear bombs dropping in the background or the line would go dead. And so really it was not my relationship was that I didn't grow up in a war zone, but I feel in many ways I grew up as a child of war too. I never chose to come to this country. My parents weren't super excited about leaving their entire livelihoods and coming here.
Right.
We ended up here, and, it's been good to us long term, but it was a tough one.
Wow. I'm so sorry.
Are you apologizing for yourself or for your government right now?
I am, I can't apologize for my government. And I didn't ever do anything personally. As a little kid,
you've been an ally yourself.
I would have been terrified. I would have been horrified with how other little kids were treating you, even when we were
Thank you, Dave
young
Larson.
like that. But no, just that the world is what it is. I mean, there's nothing what can I say? I'm sorry that.
That's all right.
But on one hand, I'm not sorry, because you're not in my life without terrible trauma in the lives of millions of other people.
There you go.
And since this is
Bright
my
side.
story and your story.
I want to tell you, if this is like a bit of a non sequitur here, I think I remembered the first time we actually, as friends, hung out, just the two of us.
Oh, okay. And what is it?
That was a time you invited me over because I was one of the only non-fully vegan or vegetarian people. And once a year, Dave Larson fell off the wagon. No, not the straight edge wagon, but the vegetarian wagon. And you would go fishing and you would catch fish, and you invited me over to your house on Capitol Hill because you were cooking fish that you made.
Oh my God.
And you didn't really know anybody else who would cook fish. And you were living with Ron Gardepee.
Yeah, Ron remembers the fish for sure. Did he eat with us too?
No.
Okay.
He was vegetarian. He didn't really exit the room. And we stayed. Oh God, Dave, it's all coming back.
You're jumping ahead though.
Okay,
but it's
not
okay.
Gonna go. When you're ready.
That's what I'm saying. And you got to understand, the whole vegetarian thing. I always ate seafood. So I would only go fishing once a year because I'd go with my father. So that was the once a year I had fish. But I would still, every once in a while, like when I would fall off the wagon, is I'd go get a fish sandwich at Burger King, and I wouldn't eat beef, pork, chicken, any of the rest of it. That's funny. I didn't know. I remember putting the fish in the paper bag with spices.
It was good fish. I do remember being pretty impressed.
Amazing. It's crazy. I did not. Wow, I didn't know. So, okay, I'm gonna hold on to that because that's part of the post meeting. We already knew each other. Obviously, I wouldn't have invited a stranger over.
We're totally friends. No, we're totally friends at that point.
Okay, how did things change for you going into junior high? Junior high sucks for everybody. Everybody, junior high is horrible.
I hated it.
Worst transition time forever. It's almost like you just lock kids up for that.
It's truly, I think, one of the more miserable times of my life.
Yes.
I mean, I would never go back there. I don't think that I hated it. I hated it.
But you begin to meet people that I know and people that will end up on this podcast in high school.
Yeah.
And something changed in high school. Things had to have gotten better.
They did. I think that I reached this point where I ended up in high school. I resolved that I wasn't going to be popular. And I know I don't want to sound like an angry person because I'm totally not. If you know me, I'm really not an angry person. I definitely have viewpoints and things, but I think I'd resolved that I wasn't going to be super popular. And I had too many family restrictions to like become prom queen or even have those kinds of aspirations. So I just resolved I was going to be super smart and I was going to get whatever I could out of this like situation that I was in. And I started like to just be like, I'm going to do whatever I want, and I was really into political stuff. I was really into, just alternative anything. I was reading Sassy magazine and I really felt like it was, groundbreaking or whatever. And someone started telling me about shows that were happening. And you kept hearing about it at the time. I mean, that was a really critical time in like Seattle's history. And I would have said it would have maybe even started even a little earlier in the 8th grade. I went to school with a guy named Eric Friedenberg.
Oh,
Yeah, Eric Friedenberg.
Yeah.
We used to ride the bus along with Jason Mesnick, who incidentally became The Bachelor, which is comedic. Bachelor from NBC or whatever, ABC, whatever it's on.
I did not know him, but I know Eric very well.
And Friedenberg used to tell me all the time, hey, you should like listen to my cousin's band. He's got a band. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I don't have time for your cousin. And I think I'm getting my dates wrong here. But at one point he gave me a cassette tape that was black and like in whiteout on it or something. It said Bleach. And I was like, okay, I got this. Dave Larson, where is that cassette tape? Because that was like the demo. You wish you had it. That was like the Nirvana demo or whatever. And I loved Eric Friedenberg because he was telling me like there's these bands, there's all this stuff going on. And
so are you saying that you got into this kind of like punk music and your transition in was Nirvana, but it was Bleach?
Yeah. Or was like...
It wasn't Nevermind. You got in with the loud, noisy one that people didn't know as much before before they broke.
Oh yeah,
that's awesome. And before that, you were listening to what kind of music?
I always listen to a lot of stuff. I mean, listen, I also have a New Kids on the Block tape somewhere in my life. Like it's probably still there.
Because we're talking about young.
Yeah, but I was like really into. I still have a friend named Jen Ingle, and we used to listen to like Belle Biv DeVoe and Guy and like all that sort of business. But then I also was like really into like this loud punk angry thing that was going on. And I think just from my background and the prepubescence I was experiencing, I love that noise. I love that like insane. My parents would yell at me to turn that crap off. Like
I listened with headphones because I didn't want to have to repeat like the problems my brother had with music my parents didn't like hearing. So I always tried to keep it. Well, I'd already been through one sibling having fighting a losing battle basically.
Yeah.
And it was, the 70s, there was Satan was in every song, backwards messages, all that stuff. And
I don't think that stuff really occurred to my parents. They just thought it sounded like crap,
Right. I think it's all kind of an excuse just for the parents don't like the music. But so is Bleach is that tape the first? I think first loud.
There were some others. I mean, like at that time, everyone had a band, right? So like people were always sharing something. Like kids in school were playing stuff. There were other little bands, and I went to school with some pretty awesome people. I mean, like I went to junior high with Dan Gallucci and like Andrea Zolo and all these amazing musicians who did.
They were
cool
in your
stuff.
high school.
They were in my junior high.
On your junior high.
They were in junior high, and then they were in high school. They went to alternative high school. I think they were wiser than I were.
I think they went to Best.
They went to Best.
I think a lot of the people that I'm going to be talking to, if they were involved in the East Side.
I love a lot of people who went to Best.
I do too.
Amazing.
And I wasn't from here, and I was a bit older. Okay, we're going to jump ahead. I hate doing this fast version of this, but keep looking at the clock.
Don't worry.
All right.
I have it on good authority. You don't have to worry.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So it doesn't appeal to everybody that way, though. That's the thing. It's only one out of every however many 100 people, end up becoming real players in like a punk scene or a hardcore scene. And the music, once Green Day and all that stuff happened, and Nirvana and everything happened, Lollapalooza,
can we start with Pinhead Gunpowder
and all that. Well, I'd love to, but I'd like to start with Operation Ivy, but and Crimp Shrine. But no, but the thing is, though, it became much more understandable to the hordes of people. Like, I doubt, like, in the early 90s to mid 90s, there were groups of dudes jumping out of cars to beat up punk rockers the way there were 10 years before.
Sure.
But even still, like someone like my older brother who's not that far away from me, who likes aggressive music and likes metal and stuff, still does not have a clue as to why it is I like the kind of music that I like.
Yeah.
You just missed the boat.
Honestly, completely. Dave, I try to explain it to people. That moment in the 90s, like whatever you were into, if you were into Pearl Jam, if you were into Mudhoney, if you were into Nirvana, whatever it was that you were into, that was a crazy moment. And we were there, and we were the right age, and it was the right time, and we got an amazing opportunity. Like people like Kate Becker fought for us in an insane way. Like how I met Kate Becker was so bonkers in a weird way. I went to go horseback riding with her. Like my parents were trying to get rid of us, and like my dad thinks it's very important that we learn to ride horses in case the revolution comes, and he wanted us to know how to like ride into the sunset by knowing to ride horses. That's why.
Oh.
That's yeah. So he called the city of Redmond. He was
so your dad's a prepper?
My dad's been a prepper ever. He's not so much anymore.
Well, he left his country during a revolution.
Shit happens.
Oh my God.
And so he was like, you guys got to get horseback riding lessons. Here we go.
These are claps. These are claps of joy. Your dad
So
rules.
Kate Becker was going to take me and my sister horseback riding, and then something happened and it got canceled. I think we're the only two people who signed up, whatever. And she was just persistent in like calling and being like, hey, let your daughter come hang out. Hey, let them come and do this. I'll be responsible for them. I can like do all this stuff. And it opened up all these doors, and we had this insane moment where not only were we part of this insane musical thing, but even as teenagers, and I was like 14, 13, whatever it was, we did it. We were the ones doing it. We got empowered like that.
Yes.
That it was an amazingly huge impact for me. I try and tell Kate this now when I see her, and I think she has so many people telling her this that she's like, okay, already, guys, I get it. Like, I gave you guys an opportunity, but I don't think I would have had half the sense of entitlement given all the obstacles of growing up in the Pacific Northwest, being a woman of color, like all that sort of stuff, if it weren't for someone like Kate Becker and Mayor Rosemary Ives saying, all right, you do it. What do you guys want to do?
It's kind of insane what got set up out there. And I want to say real quick, you mentioned Pearl Jam, you talk about Nirvana, and we talk about Green Day, but that was just like a door.
That was with a big band.
Well, that was just a doorway you walk through.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do. The idea is that then you found that underground burgeoning kind of what's really happening on the edge of things, hardcore bands and punk rock bands and things people are doing in garages that it's almost like when you hear it, you can tell this is going to be something. And maybe it's 10 years later that person's band is nominated for a Grammy or they're touring the world or something. But you knew, no, this is awesome right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like Pearl Jam and Green Day and Nirvana is just like the doorway.
That doesn't do justice to really what happened. There's no way to explain it. How do you tell somebody who wasn't there, who didn't live it, that you lived a part of what became history? Like you were part of something that at a young age everyone thought was kind of nuts, didn't get, but created a bunch of people who actually really impacted a cultural moment around the world, and continue to do so. Like,
well, now, the funny thing is that when you say around the world, you have a different perspective than other people because you saw the impact in another country.
I'm huge in Germany, thanks to you.
Yeah, but you told me a story, and we're basically up to where we've met at this point now. So you told me a story about going back to Iran to see your family.
Oh, my God.
And I don't want to say smuggling. I don't want to get you in trouble.
You can say smuggling.
Oh, yeah, you smuggled in Undertow music, the band Undertow.
Oh, yeah.
And gave tapes or made tapes for your cousins.
Oh, my God. I totally did.
And taught them how to stage dive.
Totally. Oh, my God. I did teach them how to stage dive.
That is,
amazing.
I just want to say right now that I don't care how many patches someone sews on their damn jacket and what tour you took in an $800 van and slept on people's couches. If you didn't smuggle illegal hardcore into Iran and teach kids how to illegally dance, you are not as cool as Matisse.
Oh my God. It used to be, Iran in the late 80s, early 90s. Even to this day, technically music is illegal in Iran. Technically. It doesn't mean there's not a huge burgeoning music scene. There totally is, but if they want to give you a hard time, they do. But at that time, there wasn't a burgeoning music scene. And I would go there for the summer, and I'd spend the whole summer, and I wanted music. I wanted to listen to something in my Walkman. You could take your Walkman, but, what are you going to listen to? So I used to sew the tapes into my suitcase. So I would I would hide them and sew them into the lining of the Samsonite suitcase because it was like a hardcover. And they used to open to look when you went in, but they wouldn't like undo the lining, and they weren't like running it through the x-ray machine. The way that they do these days, they would open it and search it by hand. And so if you hit it well enough, you were all right. And I was like, I need a summer of Undertow. Like, how am I going to leave here without Bikini Kill or like The Third Sex or whatever it was that I was, listening to, Seaweed and Nirvana or whatever. And I took those tapes, and I put them in and I would play them for my cousins, and there was no internet at this time. So I was it, and they'd be like, what the hell is this? And I was like, this is it. I'm part of this thing. It's called straight edge and punk. And this is what we do. We color our hair all crazy colors. And like, they're like, what are you doing? And they're like, how do you dance? And I was like, well, everybody gather around just below the bed here, and I'm going to jump and you guys catch me. And, that's how it's going to go. And it's huge because a lot of that time, like if you think for a lot of my cousins and their friends, especially when they're listening to that kind of music, it really does, it can be perceived that there's anger in it. And there was at the time, you know? And when you're living under those conditions or you have those kinds of restrictions, there's a real liberation into hearing somebody else. Music does connect people, you know? And we thought we were angry as hell and we didn't know why all the time or whatever it was. And I think they didn't necessarily either, although they had some pretty clear ideas, you know, and still do. But they became huge. Those tapes went far and wide.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's... it's going to be hard for me to find a story I'm going to like as much of that over the course of doing this podcast.
Oh, thanks.
And how do you, like you asked, like, how do you describe this to people? Well, I'm going to do about 100 podcasts in search of that understanding. So, okay, that is a really good story. So we become friends, and one night you blindfolded me and drove me to a restaurant. Do you remember this?
Did I take you to Ethiopian food?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
You said...
Wait, was Dave Verellen there?
Dave Verellen.
Oh my God.
Dave Verellen from Botch, singer Botch, and I get blindfolded, put in Maddie's vehicle, and driven to an Ethiopian restaurant. I still don't know where this restaurant is. I do think I might have figured it out. Yeah. And I guess it was because white people were supposed to know how to get there.
And you know what it was? I just really felt like the scene. I mean, come on, Dave. How many people of color were in the entire scene? I think it was like me, Morgan, later.
Matsuoka,
and...
a few people, I don't know.
Pause. We have to really rack our brains. Like, those are the people that really stood out to me. But I was like, how am I going to convince Dave Larson, picky eater, and and Dave Verellen, who I did have a big crush on, to go to a flipping Ethiopian restaurant and eat with their hands, like food that, like, it was a lot. So I was like, the only way to do it, and first also to go to Rainier, like a.
So you just made it a game. I thought
it wasn't. I thought if I didn't make it exciting, you guys were going to talk yourselves out of it. And I still remember the story. You guys, the expression when they put the injera bread in front of you was so classic.
What was the expression?
It was not pretty.
I gotta tell you something. That was some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life.
Awesome.
It was so good. And you were happy with us for one thing.
Yes.
And you were upset with us for one other thing. Do you remember what you were happy with us for?
You did try it.
Oh, I wanted more.
Yeah.
I've wanted to go there ever since.
Awesome.
But you told us, and we didn't know, you said that we passed the eating test. Do you remember that?
I don't remember
After we
this.
ate, you said, I just want to let you know you both passed the eating test.
So because you ate with your hands.
And also because you said that we didn't eat like horrible chewing with our mouths open, talking, spilling food out. Like,
thank God, I would have left.
Right. So that's nice because we didn't know there was an eating test.
Yeah.
We upset you when we referred to the bread as the pancake.
It's a little sensitive. How hard is it to say injera?
I don't know that word to this day. Let me tell you something.
I remember I got upset with you about something.
Fantastic pancake.
It's injera bread. It's made with tough flour and soda, and it's really hard to make.
It was so good, and every single bite of everything that I could not identify that was on that plate that went in that bread was phenomenal. Spicy. Awesome. I mean, I love that kind of food.
I still love Ethiopian food.
Yeah, it's literally the only time I've ever gone to Ethiopian food.
Yeah.
And I mean, I grew up in a place where
like all of us ate. I think it cost $20 total, and we didn't want to eat again for like 3 years. They brought us so much food.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And kind of looked at us like, whoa, what are you doing here?
What the hell are
you know, and but I grew up in a place where you'd be like, oh yeah, Ethiopian food, and someone would be like, what's that? Sand on a plate? Like, you know. So it was a great experience. Yeah. And I did kind of feel like, well, I can't repeat this. And then there was a little bit like, well, I'm not supposed to go there alone. Maybe I'm not welcome.
I think at that time in Seattle, you may not have been. Because, like, I think they allowed us because I was like, all right, I'm Iranian. I'm coming here. You guys are refugees. I'm a refugee. Let's just make it happen. Can I get some injera?
Dave?
Yeah?
Is Maddie here?
Yay!
Oh, look what happened.
Sorry.
Okay.
Recording already?
We are, but I'm so excited to see you.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting.
Come and interrupt.
Okay. So this is
so good to see you.
The second time in my young podcast career.
Let's enter the indebted part of the program.
Miss Michael Ann has now barged in,
Yeah,
and
well,
she
you
did
maybe
not know
shouldn't do
Maddie
this
was
in
here.
the house, on an evening after I work and tell me that you're going to be starting way earlier than you started.
Okay.
I did not think I'd be interrupting. I'm sorry.
No, it's actually, you know what? This can bring us to a story that's kind of about this point in the proceedings. I think this will work out.
Uh-oh, what story?
So Michael Ann owns this home that I'm podcasting out of. We've been together for 20 years this year. Talked about this before on here.
Not yet. Several months away.
Coming.
Why are we together? How did this happen? How did we meet? Oh, someone's clearing their throat at the microphone.
Something's in my throat.
That would be your
At
fault.
these?
It's the sound of "I told you so."
Now, I told you that I wanted to meet Michael Ann, and I had made some failed attempts at meeting Michael Ann.
Yes,
Yeah.
Lloyd Dobler.
Lloyd Dobler, indeed.
Like I talked about in the Rocky episode, I dressed as Lloyd Dobler for a Halloween party I thought she'd be at, and she wasn't there. And because I had seen
I
Michael
was.
Ann at the old firehouse. Oh, you remember that?
I do remember.
And Rocky was
Yeah.
wearing the silver outfit
Yeah,
for
he looked
Stay
good.
522.
So
So
sad I missed that.
I had saw Michael Ann at the old firehouse with some of her friends. You already brought up Eric Friedenberg.
Yeah.
He was there. She was probably there with his girlfriend Michelle, and they were playing
My
pool,
besties at the time.
and they were laughing
Michelle
about some
Jacobson?
joke.
No, Michelle Brady at the time.
Yeah.
And I fell for you because of your laugh across the room,
Yes.
and thought, oh, geez, who's that girl?
I don't blame you.
Started asking around. Asked Jake Snyder about her. That part.
That went over well.
It did, but that'll come up when I get Jake in that seat about what that conversation
Jake
was.
didn't talk about my laugh.
Did you guys hear that? That's still an amazing laugh. Come on.
It's good. And I mentioned to you
Yes.
that I needed a way to meet Michael Ann.
Mm-hmm.
And tell me, what did you come up with?
You know what? Can I not tell you exactly what I came up with because my memory isn't perfect? But I so remember the feeling because I don't get it that often. But the minute he said to me, "There's this girl," I know this is kind of weird. First of all, Dave Larson asking me about a girl was the equivalent of like, I don't even have a comparison. You know, like you never asked me about girls. You know, like you're always like, "This is what's going on in the scene. We got to sell all these records. I got a closet full of this crap. Screw this band." Like whatever it was. So suddenly Dave Larson's like very seriously like, "I need to talk to you about this girl," you know? And I was like, who? Like, who's it going to be? And I had this like Rolodex of people going through my head of like, who could possibly like get your attention? And when you said Michael Ann, I had this insane feeling, which I have not had. It happened like once before when I introduced somebody else where I was like, I was like, that's it. That is your partner. Like, I don't know what to
You
say
were right.
or do. I was right.
But
But I don't remember what I did.
Okay, so you called me up and said, I have a plan. There's a show at the old firehouse.
Right.
Michael Ann wanted me to come pick her up and take her to the show. She didn't have a ride to the show.
Yeah, I didn't have a car yet.
And your plan was this. You were going to give me Michael Ann's address, call her and say, I can't come get you. I sent my friend Dave to get you. And I was just going to show up having never met her, and she's going to come to the door and supposedly come to the show with me.
Yeah.
At which point I said, hell no.
Unfortunately.
I will not
No,
do
best
that.
call ever. Best call ever. I would so not have probably gotten in the car.
Probably not.
If
But
I
I
had
did.
show-
I do think that was an excellent idea to this
Well,
day.
it was. I like that you were thinking.
I was.
And look, the die was cast at that
And in
point.
fact,
There
I
was
think
no.
she actually tried to set it up, even though you'd already said hell no.
Yeah, I did.
And I was like,
I do.
hell no.
Yeah.
Oh, so there was.
I do.
I
She's
actually
right
remember
because
that.
I remember she was like, "You want me to get in a car with some dude?" I don't know.
And I
he's
only
gonna-
kind of vaguely knew who he was from people like Matt Matsuoka, and that's it.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
Yeah, so that wasn't going to work.
no.
Okay, but what ended up happening was you still said, well, we're going to make plans to go out to coffee after the show.
Right.
And that was it. Like that.
Yeah.
Come
So
on.
you came, you picked me up.
We got
and
to
we
sit
went out.
across the seat from each other, or
What
across
was
the
that
table
coffee
from
place
each other.
called? It was in downtown
Hotel
Redmond.
Cafe.
Hotel Cafe.
Oh, was it the Hotel Cafe
Hotel
that night?
Cafe,
It's
yeah.
like a Vietnamese restaurant.
And I came there
now.
with another boy that night.
Yeah, we got rid of him.
We did very shortly thereafter.
Yeah.
And so the next day, Red Rocket were playing in the U District.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
I went to that show. It was in a record store. All those guys were there.
Oh, yeah,
Your
that's-
apartment was in the U District. You were like, come over, because we had met each other
Yeah, 'cause it
now.
was just up the street. Yeah.
And 1 week later, we went on a date, and you claimed the Red Rocket Day as our anniversary, and I claimed the date day
even
as the
No,
anniversary.
the day before, the first night at the Hotel Cafe.
Hotel
knew.
Cafe should be your anniversary.
Yeah, it is.
Only so I can be involved.
Just because
it's
that's our
December
first
2nd.
words with each other. That's the first words with each other, but we went
Yeah,
on
but
a
I
date.
knew.
Yeah.
But
We went on a
I knew
date.
I wasn't. I knew I didn't go home with that boy that night.
Well, okay, that's nice. And
I'd
I'm,
like to say I had something to do with that as well.
Yeah.
oh,
Because there was what, like 5 or 6 of us at the table.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it was just you and me and this other
Yeah.
random boy and Maddie. It was.
look,
no,
I
it
know
was-
there were other people there, but I only
Yeah.
remember you.
Exactly.
Good
That's the whole
answer.
point.
what I
And
did.
that there is 20 years
Yeah.
of commitment, right? That's why.
Yep, yep. And see, if it wasn't for this friendship being first, you would never
you
have
go.
met me.
Ever.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. So you will always and forever be in our lives.
Feels good to be right.
All right,
All right,
we're
I'm gonna
running
leave
out
you-
of
I'm
time,
gonna
and
leave
I
you
want to
guys.
get to.
Yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay.
I'm gonna leave you guys here and let you guys finish up your.
Well, I'm gonna say that your interruptions have worked out great so far.
Yeah.
We're
Every
still
day at
gonna
work
have
was
to
okay.
rig some kind of lighting thing on the door or something, so you know.
Yeah, we need one of those on
On
air.
air.
things.
On
You need
air.
to put it like outside on the front of the house so that before I ever drive up and make the dog.
Maybe you
bark.
could make, you could teach Winston to be a guard dog for the recording.
We can't teach him anything. No.
No, we really can't.
All right,
Okay.
fine.
Go,
Well, thank you, babe.
finish.
I'm glad we got to tell that story. Huh?
Bye, Michael.
Bye, guys.
Yeah, all right, back to business.
Back to business. I love that girl.
So do I.
Honestly, Dave, you really lucked out. She's flipping amazing.
Yeah, life's lottery.
It is life's lottery. I love
Yeah.
her.
At one point, I had an
She
opportunity
lucked
to
out
work.
too, just for the record.
Well, okay, but
Yeah.
it's pretty much me.
Come on.
I'm pretty much the winner. There's a lot of things I've missed out on, and I just try to I'll keep myself centered by thinking that, some things did work out.
Fair enough.
Okay. So, and then I asked you to be in The Edge of Quarrel. I asked you to play the big role for a female character.
Can we say something right before?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, you were writing Edge of Coral and you were telling me about this, right?
Sure, because I wrote it for a long time.
You wrote it for a really long time. You were working on the script for a very long time, and you didn't have a prolific female person in the script for a while. And when you were talking about it, it was always these bands. It was always this thing. And I think that, and this was the Riot Girl at the time in me speaking, that I really pushed you to be like, you have to have a woman. You have to really make it be like, this isn't just about men in the scene. I don't know if you remember this. I remember it very clearly at one point. And we had like this weird tiff about it. And then you were like,
Weird tip.
it wasn't a tiff. We had a
talk about it.
discussion about it. And I was like,
So it's probably like, well, then it's going to be you then.
something like that. And I was like, but I wasn't trying to say it should be me. I was just saying it should be someone. That sounds really I was really self-conscious that you would think that I was trying to jockey for a role. Although let's not kid around. Like I totally wanted to be part of that.
Well, I think I was still surprised when you were willing to do it. I was surprised at how good you were at it.
Oh, thanks.
I was surprised at the level of professionalism and effort that you brought to the whole project. Like,
Thanks.
there were
Dave.
few people that were as Johnny on the spot about it as you were.
Oh, thank you.
Janie on the spot,
Janie.
whatever. Some Riot Girl thing. No. But no, I mean that it doesn't come together without you, look, so also that means it's partly your fault.
True. But
Okay.
what? Listen. Yeah. I also think it's really a beautiful thing that I was like the first woman to be part of that film, and also that I get to be the first woman on the show.
Oh,
I think like life has an interesting way of going in the circles.
Maybe that does mean something. Okay,
I'm taking it.
I'm open to such things.
I like that kind of serendipity in life, so I'm taking it.
Very cool. Well,
And I loved being part of Edge of Coral. It is something that I will confess to you at times. I've been like, oh my God, I work at the United Nations. It shows up in Google. What do I do? Or like, how do I answer when clients are Googling me and it comes up and they're like, are you the Matthews Keshavarz in this movie? Like, are you an actress?
I've heard so many stories from so many people, but none of them are like this.
But I hear, amazing things have happened to me from being part of that film.
No, in spite of.
First of all, I loved being part of it because I think that there was so much that happened, and you'll recall there were certain people that kind of Seattle became so popular that there it became so popular that a lot of people started moving here from other places, and they weren't people who really understood the moment in the same way those of us who'd grown up here or who had those frustrations about growing up in this damp, dark,
Yeah.
kind of amazing artistic town. And they came here, and I used to always say, oh, these are all these people that come here to heal. They're like broken people that have come here to heal. And a lot of them caused a lot of divisions in the scene, you know, and it was a really painful time. And I think that that moment really influenced a lot of your writing
Yes.
on Edge of Coral. And it's very telling kind of some of what was happening there. And for me, I was graduating college and I knew I didn't want to stay in Seattle. I had these aspirations of doing international work and kind of implying what I had dedicated my life to learning about or whatever. And that was like the summer, like our last hurrah for me. It was kind of a last hurrah where I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to get a job really. I'm going to like be part of this film. I want Dave to succeed at doing it. I knew it was going to be historic because I knew that that moment of Seattle grunge and punk rock and all that sort of stuff was evolving. I'm not going to say it was ending, but it was changing. You know, Kurt died, like all this other stuff happened, you know, Green Day became huge. They weren't going to play our house shows anymore, you know, like all these little things were happening where we would have maybe called them sellouts at the time. In retrospect, they were, you know, securing their futures. Good on ya. But I really wanted to be a part of it. And it was truly a summer of like teamwork and partnership and love amongst this scene and this community that we created. And I love it. I loved it.
Now, when did you leave?
I moved to New York January 29th 1999. January 29th, 1999.
Okay, so the movie wasn't even finished for almost a year.
It wasn't.
But the filming had been done. I was just about to go into the editing stage.
Yes.
So there may have even been. Did you ever have to come to my apartment and do lines in the microphone in front of the TV? So was that after you left, or were you back to see family?
I came back to see family once. I think it was like a year. I was gone that first time for a really long time, and I came back. I think I want to say September.
Yeah,
was the first time I came back.
And I needed audio bad, probably.
Yeah, you did. It was a thing. And then I came back for one of the premieres.
Oh, awesome.
I remember what I wore.
You were just happened to be back.
No, I came back for it.
You came back for it?
Yeah.
Okay,
I wasn't going to miss that.
I'm definitely...
4 hours. And you were so sensitive about anybody suggesting you edit it more.
No. It's 2 hours long. It's 2 hours long, not 4 hours long.
I felt like it was 4 hours. Sorry.
No, yes. Look, it's not, okay, I'm going to be talking about this movie a lot. And it's not that the movie is worth talking about that much. It's that we all worked on it together and it was part of our collective.
It's not just that. I don't undermine your film. Like, I understand you probably have criticisms of it. I understand you're like,
sure, I do.
all those sorts of things. But truly, it captured something that for those of us who grew up here, that were part of that moment in history. And it took a long time to really realize that that was a historic time to be in Seattle. Like, look at all that's happened. It's been 25 years since that moment. That your film is one of the only documentations of the people, of the mood, of the actions and things. And like some of it is like a metaphor, because if you weren't part of it, you like, okay, it's a movie and like you'll have an opinion of it one way or another. But I got recognized for that film on the streets of New York and on the subway. Like, stuff still happens to me.
Rocky
a year
got
ago,
recognized in Spain.
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm huge in Germany. Like, why is this hard to believe? Like, ich liebe dich, Deutschland. It's like...
All right, so let's talk about real accomplishments that people have in their life in this room. Let's talk about you leaving Seattle and going to New York and the things you've done since.
Yeah.
What have you done with your life?
I left Seattle and I moved to New York in 1999. And I went to work for a project that was with the UN. And I lucked out. You know, I didn't luck out. I worked hard. I will be honest.
I created luck.
I created luck for myself. And I suffered and fought tooth and nail because I don't come from a family where my last name gets me through the doors. And I've built a career for myself out of it and working in human rights and social justice related causes.
Do you still work in conjunction with the UN?
I do. They're a client now. They're instead of my employer.
So you're like a private contractor.
Mm-hmm.
What services do you provide?
I run a PR firm that I've run now for 7 years about, and it's called the Make Agency, and it's a play off my name, and the Matty's ketchup jars that we began with. And I run this firm, and I consult people on arts, politics, and culture, and with a special emphasis on human rights. I represent the underdog, so I have represented in the post 9/11 climate, literally at one point, all of the Guantanamo detainees and detainees at Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan. And
who contacted you? Is that something you put yourself into, or were you contacted by someone that needed representation?
I worked for another firm, and while I was there, we represented an organization called the Center for Constitutional Rights. And the Center for Constitutional Rights specialized in the death penalty kind of related cases. So after 9/11, and I was in New York for that. After 9/11, those attorneys were the only ones that were interested in what was happening in terms of all these people being rendered to an island known as Guantanamo, which is next to Cuba, but not separate island, same island. And they had experience because Haitian refugees had been sent there because of their HIV status in the early 90s, and they had represented them.
Haitian refugees had been sent to Guantanamo Bay.
Yes,
and
because they were
trying
to come to the United States, and they were HIV positive, and it was the middle of the AIDS scare. And so they'd sent a lot of people there.
Okay.
And so the attorneys,
they essentially already knew the channels.
They knew the channels, and they had experience doing death penalty work, and they were like, wait a minute, you can't render and send these people there. It's against the Constitution. You're breaking international law, la, 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 la. And only death penalty attorneys were willing to take on some of these cases. And I was...
Now, when you say death penalty attorneys, you mean people that are trying to fight against the
death penalty attorneys that represented death penalty cases and were doing anti-death penalty work. So they were very familiar with representing the least popular people in society. And they gathered through the Center for Constitutional Rights, and were looking at ways to address the legal concerns of sending these individuals.
Now, at first, if I remember correctly, it wasn't even necessarily Guantanamo Bay. It was just people being arrested, and no one knew where they were.
No one knew where they were, but we knew that they were going to Guantanamo.
And these weren't... Now, at first, wasn't it... Totally correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you telling me, like, one time when you were back, right after this stuff went down and everything was crazy, that it wasn't like battlefield people from Afghanistan that had been sent there, but it was there were people that had been arrested here in the U.S. under mistaken identity, or they were like no-fly list people stuff, and a lot of your initial involvement was just trying to get them connected with their families,
right? And
a number of those people never did anything wrong and were free.
I think history has shown that a number of those people were released without charge, or were released without,
So let's be clear about this. How long imprisoned with no charges and no contact with a family member?
For those Guantanamo detainees?
No, for the ones we're talking about, like in the U.S. that didn't go
in
to Guantanamo. That weren't battlefield. That were people that were in the U.S. that were then detained.
I think one of the most prominent cases is Maher Arar, who's a Canadian citizen who was returning from Jordan and had a layover. He was returning from Jordan, from Syria, and he was going to his home in Toronto, and he had a layover in JFK. He was arrested. He wasn't sent to Guantanamo. He was sent back to Syria, and after going through private sites, and he suffered immensely. And I believe it's been a while, and I'm sorry that I don't remember the exact. I think he was for a year.
But in the end, no charges. He'd never done anything wrong.
No, he never did. He's in fact sued the Canadian government, who's issued a formal apology and recognition. But if you look at the number of cases that are still in Guantanamo, and the individuals that are just, this past week, they repatriated, as they say, a lot of people to Uruguay. Those individuals were not officially convicted of doing anything wrong.
Right.
And that's been 13 some years.
And there's a lot of people who are very opposed to letting any of these guys out of Guantanamo Bay.
I took these cases on. I was, doing this human rights work, and I only agreed to do these kinds of cases. I think it also kind of happened to me because they're like, hey, you're Middle Eastern, you're Muslim, you speak the language, jump on board, And I wanted to do it, not because of any grandiose sense of, self, but I was like, I don't know what happened to these guys, but I'm Muslim and I really don't like what's going on over here. And I feel a sense of obligation to my community, to figure out what's happening. And I also happen to believe in the rule of law. So I don't believe in executions for anybody, for anything,
Right, but
first of all, I also don't believe in war and all that kind of business,
But you have to charge somebody.
You can't
and
kidnap somebody.
Eventually.
You cannot kidnap somebody from their home in Pakistan, where there was no war, and they're sitting with their 2 children at dinner time, or they're sleep, and you can't then put them on a plane blindfolded and gallivant them around the country to secret places without them having any contact to an attorney, any idea of the charges against them, or any idea of what, they've done wrong, and then keep them in a prison and under inhumane conditions and abuse them and violate international law, and not ever tell them why or give them due process. That's just not what...
Right, you can't
you can do
that.
it if you're a
We can
dictator state and you want to be in violation of every,
Right, and we can say morally you can't do that, but you can do that because that was what was done and has been done.
It's still in the courts whether or not you can do that. The fact is,
what's going to happen
did
retroactively?
do that.
I'd love to see something happen. I'd love to see somewhere, some authority come down and say, this was wrong and someone has to account for it.
Maybe one day they will.
And this whole idea of we had to do because of the situation, and 24
Look
was
what
on
it
TV
did.
at the time, and that was used for a lot of the justification for torture, which is a connected issue. I mean, some of that torture
You could look
had to
at
do
that
with
moment in history and look at the ramifications of that moment in history.
Yeah.
You set the precedent that you could treat people like that. And you did it, and you made people what they call the other.
Yeah.
You demonized and made people completely inhuman to the rest of us. And just because they're a bad person and they must be bad, and look where they're, and the subtext to that, and some of them were, I'm not trying to make excuses. Some of them are bad guys, however we want to put it.
Yeah,
they did shitty things. They were shitty people, whatever you want to call it. Fine.
Yeah.
But the point is that we're human beings, and we have to rise above the inhuman acts or beliefs of other people and not treat a group of them like they're all the same.
Right.
And what they did is they took a group of people and took away justice and law, and then they set a precedent, and that precedent has resulted in the foreign policy that we suffer through now.
Right.
And all the crappy things that are happening in the world now. And every time you bring it up and you're like, but you can't behead people and you can't kidnap and do all these things to American citizens. And the response is, yeah, but you've been waterboarding us for 13 years.
Right. And look, I don't like either of them, but we can't say waterboarding and beheading are the same thing, obviously.
Obviously not. But what I'm saying is that when you start, it creates and perpetuates a cycle of violence.
Sure.
And a lack of compassion towards one another. And it's terrible.
Yes,
and the alliances. I mean, I'm yes, of course you can't compare waterboarding and beheading.
But every waterboarding instance that occurred should be prosecuted under war crimes. Because we did.
Mm-hmm.
Our government prosecuted other people for waterboarding our soldiers, and then we did it. So guess what, guys? Good for the goose, good for the gander.
It's not pretty.
And I don't get into a lot of this stuff in this podcast,
it's probably
but it's
not
what
part
you
of the punk
do,
rock scene,
and it's
but
interesting. No, it's interesting, and I'm not going to go too much into politics on this show, but
probably better for everyone who's listening.
no, it's good for everybody. But this is so interesting. So we're going to swerve back out of that
I started working
territory.
in human rights. How's that?
You start working in human rights, and it's so interesting. But see, that's the thing, though. Punk rock. I mean, look at the lyrics of a lot of these bands. Of the political lyrics, you went and did something in the world about the kinds of beliefs that were being talked about in that world. And so that's very impressive to me.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And I will say, though, that historically, a lot of my friends in the scene, as they say, we've never lost contact. We maybe didn't talk so much or whatever, but I still feel like it's a community, and I've come back to folks at different points and I've been like, can you help these guys out? Can you do this? Or can we do stuff? One interesting example, just for the purpose of this podcast, is that there's a band called there was a movie called Heavy Metal in Baghdad, which featured a Baghdadi band, like a metal band.
Yeah.
And they were coming to the US, and in various instances, like I'm just saying little moments and things, but they were coming to the US. They were moving to New York after having to flee Iraq. They were featured in a Vice film, and Vice contacted me and they were like, these guys are coming, what do we do? And I wouldn't have been able to help them, I think, in the way that I did, just because if I had just been another human rights activist or whatever, I got the scene, I got the music stuff, and it was through those things, like I helped get them jobs, I helped them get the established, and at various points I've gotten myself in a bunch of pickles with a lot of Middle Eastern bands seeking asylum who've ended up living on my couch for 3 months, not because they were my friends or I believed in human rights for them, and necessarily, I mean, I obviously did, but because I was like, I have this punk rock DIY background and ethic, And that built me into who I am. So I got to stay true to it. I still got to help these guys. You know, it still is part of who I am. And it's that moment we were talking about,
That
you
is
know?
phenomenal. So what kind of stuff are you working on now currently? Is there any of that you can talk about?
Some of it I do talk about. One of the big victories has been the Afghan Bagram Air Force Base, the release of some of the prisoners that are there. It's a victory in that they were released just before we're going to the Supreme Court.
No, is that it? I don't know if people know about that. Is that just like another Guantanamo Bay?
It's like another Guantanamo Bay. They decided to
Prison
close
at the Air Force
in
Base.
December. Yeah. Bagram prison, yeah.
That doesn't really make its way into our presidential politics here, so people
why
don't know
bother?
much about it.
But I've been working on that case pro bono for, a long time, at least 7 years, maybe longer. And so that's a small victory in terms of their being released. It's not so much of a victory because it's unclear where they've been repatriated to and all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
But you know, I chose to go into PR as opposed to like going to diplomacy because I realized that I could kind of see a beginning and end to a lot of cases and projects. And so that's it's very rewarding for me. I am also producing a lot more. I'm producing a TV show for a major network that is focused on music. And you guys, I can't talk about more than that.
Oh,
but
well, can you talk to me privately about it?
I can talk to you privately about it, but I've signed an NDA, so I cannot talk specifics. But everyone will get to hear and see about it, which I'm super excited. And again, that's something that my punk rock roots lends credibility to me for. Google me, comes up. Edge of Coral comes up. I'm from you. I am of you. You can trust me. I understand the music scene. And that's been really great and super rewarding. And I continue to do a lot of the human rights work, a lot of the stuff that you see. I did a lot around Ferguson. I represent some of the people that are on the ground there in Ferguson this past summer. And, leading up to that, I do a lot of the police brutality stuff and kind of domestically in the U.S. And almost any and everything that relates to the Middle East comes through my desk in one way or another. I don't get to talk about a lot of it publicly, but.
So I feel this way about Greg Bennick too. And Greg and I did not talk extensively about the work that he's done. We talked about a lot of the fun stuff.
Greg and I talk a lot sometimes about extensively.
But Bennick and I talked about some stuff. And this is the way I feel about Bennick, and this is the way I feel about you, is that I'm impressed by what you do because I know that it wouldn't take much time in that world to crush me emotionally.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. I only really operate well and all the way back from when we met, in here's what we can do. Let's build something. Let's do something exciting and have fun and be friends. And I don't, once you start getting into dark places, it's like, even if you are crucial and you work hard to make a dent in these horrible things that are happening around the world, it feels like, do you ever get a sense of having a victory or
you do sometimes.
Are you okay with just being the dent?
You know what's strange? I'm Facebook friends with a lot of former detainees of Guantanamo or people who have gone through some adversity that I've helped, and I remember there are moments that you just feel like, holy cow, I actually just did something. I remember the day Bush got elected. And I was in Washington, D.C. protesting, and it was so cold and it was such a horrible day. And I had seen this amazing moment where the new Black Panther Party had come down screaming at the pigs and like all this amazing stuff. You're like, wow, like you're doing all this stuff and all these people are out here and like, what's our future going to be? And we failed, because this election's stolen and all that stuff that you feel. And I got a phone call from a client who was crying hysterically saying that her brother-in-law's death sentence had been commuted. And in that terrible sadness and whatever, you're kind of like, wow, I just did something. I'd placed these op-eds, we'd done all this stuff. And like, they chose this case, like, to Clinton commuted this death sentence. How could that, be? And you have moments like that. And sometimes you see these Gitmo detainees who post pictures with their families, or they get married, or they have a positive life milestone, or they're writing something. And you feel like, all right, like these people are back with their families, and it is a dark job at times. Like it's not a super bright job, and it took me a really long time to figure out how you sparse out like the dark stuff without becoming a dark person, and without kind of wrecking your personal relationships, you know, whether they be romantic or friends or whatever, because you bring your work home. You know, you saw when I walked into your house today, the conversation I was having on the phone, you know, like.
But you still have a fire and energy and exuberance that you bring.
I love people.
Right.
I love humanity. I really believe it's so corny. I'm super corny in this way.
So this has not crushed you. It has not darkened you.
Some days, but not
Everyone
most
has
days.
a dark day.
Some days you kind of like, you really like, some things really, really hurt your soul. Like James Foley being beheaded really, really hurt my soul. You know, he's a friend of many friends. And you're kind of like, how can this be? You know, I look at what's happening in Syria on the borders and you're like, how do you tell people? Gaza crushes me when that stuff happens, because you can only argue with people so far, and some things are not complicated. Human rights is not complicated.
Right.
It's black and white. Don't treat people like that. Period. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you come from. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what religion they believe in. There is a path to peace, and there is a path to a harmonious living. It's not a utopia. Humanity's ugly. Living is ugly. Relationships are ugly. Life is ugly. You know, it's hard. But, you know, you can start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I started with Seattle punk rock.
Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you, and I'm very proud whenever I see your name come up or see you involved in something.
Thanks, Dave Larson.
It's so we don't get to see each other nearly enough anymore, but
we're memorialized in this podcast.
and we'll be friends forever.
20 years and running.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for coming out.
Can I still get invited for a fish dinner one of these days?
Oh, I gotta learn
Do you
how
still
to
go
do
fishing?
that again. I haven't been able to catch a fish in a long time. I'm a little afraid of the fish. I think it's all poison now.
Yeah, but it's not Fukushima poisoned. You can go to the river.
I think up here we are Fukushima
Yeah,
poisoned.
you kind of are.
I don't
Fukushima.
know. That's for the conspiracy.
That's for the
podcast
conspiracy podcast.
that we
Sign me
haven't-
up. I have information.
Well, we haven't started it yet. Oh,
Wow.
that'll be great if you could.
I'd be an excellent person on the conspiracy. You have my client base.
I'll make you fish someday.
Awesome. Please do.
Thank you so much for coming out.
Love you, Dave Larson.
Love you too.
Woo woo.
All right. I really wish I had an opportunity to have more time with Matisse for this episode, but time constraints being what they are, this is a slightly shorter episode than what I've done so far. But, you know, she has been such a positive influence in my life and in the lives of so many people, and I feel like that came through. You know, I'm just thrilled that I had the opportunity to catch her while she was in town and get her on tape. As far as corrections go in this episode, I think the only thing really that, listening back to it, the only thing to correct is when I stupidly said that Oklahoma wasn't part of the South, or that I didn't really think of it as being part of the South. And look, when I look on a map, which I did, Oklahoma is much more southern than it was in my memory of the layout of the United States. But I just still think of it as more of a Midwest kind of cowboy state, more than I think of it as some kind of deep South Confederate state. I realize maybe from 4-year-old Matisse's point of view, there wasn't much of a difference. But, you know. So anyway, that's just me being fairly ignorant of the map of my own country, which isn't terribly surprising. Anyway, so that's basically it. Thanks for listening. Rate us and review us on iTunes, please, and follow our Twitter account at NosyNobody, and see you shortly with another episode.
This podcast is a product of the Nobody's Knows Podcast Network. Executive producers David R. Larson and K. Drake Streetman. Music for this episode provided by Polymorph from the record Artifacts, Demos, and Debris.